Hello, everybody. Mr. Kacur here. I hope you all enjoyed listening to and following along with Scaredy Squirrel by Melanie Watt. Wasn't that a great story? Kind of a funny story. Now that we've had the opportunity to read and listen to the story Scaredy Squirrel by Melanie Watt, let's talk about how, as good readers, it is important to pay attention to the character of a story. Characters are the heart of any story, and the character of this story, Scaredy Squirrel, is the heart of this story. We should pay very close attention to how the character acts. How did Scaredy Squirrel act in this story? How the character speaks. How did Scaredy Squirrel speak in this story? And what the character says and what the character thinks. How did Scaredy Squirrel think in this story? What did the Scaredy Squirrel do in this story? Then, as good readers, we should ask ourselves this question: what does this tell me about how the character feels? What does this tell me about how the character feels? How did Scaredy Squirrel feel in this story? And what feeling does this capture? What feeling does this capture? Readers, especially good readers, develop inferences when they read. What is an inference, you say? Mr. Kacur, what is an inference? Well, I will tell you. Readers develop inferences by 1. Noticing clues about the character in the text provided to us by the author of the story or the book. Those are called text clues. Text clues tell us something about the character that the author wants us to know. So let's think back to Scaredy Squirrel. Scaredy Squirrel, the author tells us, did not like to leave his tree, right? He didn't like to leave his tree because he had many, many, many fears. One of those fears was of germs, remember? Another one of those fears was of killer bees, right? So the author gives us clues within the text that he wants us to notice about the character. And then any good reader noticing those text clues will combine what they read with their own background knowledge. Background knowledge, or you might have heard it called your own schema. So we combine the clues that the author gives us, the text clues, with what we already know about people like this. I'm sure as you were reading and following along with Scaredy Squirrel, you were thinking immediately either of yourself or a family member or a friend that maybe had some of the same fears, the same worries that Scaredy Squirrel has. I know myself, I'm deadly afraid of snakes. I don't care how small the snake is. If it crosses in front of me, I'm going to jump and scream. Even though I'm a 6'3" guy, I do not like snakes. And I also know somebody that all of you know too who doesn't like snakes, and that would be Mrs. Morrissey. Mrs. Morrissey and I share that common fear of snakes. So, right then and there, I just used my own background knowledge of myself. I relayed this story to myself about my own fears, as well as I relayed Mrs. Morrissey's fears because I know Mrs. Morrissey. So, when we read, any good reader notices the text clues in a reading that are provided by the author and combines them with our own background knowledge or our own schema. And I know you all know somebody that reminds you of the Scaredy Squirrel. It might even be yourself. And then what we do as good readers, once we use those text clues and we combine them with our background knowledge, we can make an inference. And an inference is basically a prediction, a conclusion about future events that will happen in the story. What will happen next? Now, I'm not going to come up and make an inference saying, well, you know what? Scaredy Squirrel, I think he got stung by a bee and then went to Pizza Hut and had a big pizza. I'm not going to make an inference like that because, first of all, I was given no text clues by the author that said that the squirrel even likes pizza. And really, having a squirrel go to a Pizza Hut, I mean, have you ever heard of that happening in your own schema? So we don't want to go way off base with making our inferences. We don't want to make predictions that are so in outer space, right? We want to make inferences or predictions or draw conclusions based on the text information, the clues that we're given along with our own background knowledge. And we want to make our inferences and predictions sensible and logical as to what may happen in future events in the story. So, again, as good readers, we use text clues that were provided by the author within our story or our book. This tells us what the character says, right? What it says about the character given to us by the author. What it says about the character with clues given to us or provided to us by the author. We combine that, we add that to our own background knowledge. I know, I know a lot about squirrels. I know that squirrels live in trees. I know that squirrels in the fall are running around gathering nuts for the winter, right? So I combine the text clues with my own background knowledge and my schema, and then I can make a logical, right? We want it to be logical and sensible. We don't want it to be way in outer space to make a prediction like the squirrel got stung by a bee and he's going to go to Pizza Hut for a pepperoni pizza. Okay? There was nothing that told us that squirrels even go like pizza or that there was a Pizza Hut nearby. So we're not going to make way out left field predictions or inferences. We want to draw our inferences, make our inferences of so what we think will happen to the character in the future, based on the text clues that are provided to us by the author, combined with our own background knowledge, and make a logical inference, conclusion, or prediction of what will happen in the future with that character. Inferences. Here's a little chart over here that we can refer to a visual. So we use our background knowledge, what I know, what I know. We add it to the text clues within the text, what the author tells us about that character. How does that character feel? How does that character act? What does that character say? What does the character do? And we use both the background knowledge and text clues provided to us to form an inference, which an inference is another way of saying a prediction or drawing a conclusion as to what will happen next or happen in the future to our character in a story. Take a look at this slide. A killer bee appears. Scaredy Squirrel jumps in panic, knocking his emergency kit out of the tree. This was not part of the plan. So notice over here the author gives us text clues. All right? Well, we already knew in the past, right? We knew that one of the clues that the author had given us was that before this killer bee appeared, we knew that Scaredy Squirrel was deadly afraid of killer bees, right? So we know that the squirrel is not going to have a positive reaction to this bee. So we're going to stop on that slide and we're going to ask ourselves a question. Let's make an inference. What text clues do we have to make our inference? What's going to happen after that slide? Right? Based on the text clues, I know that he's afraid of a lot of things, including killer bees. All right? So I know that already. What background knowledge can we combine? Well, I know that when I was a kid, if I stepped on a bee, it stung horribly. And I remember one time my mom had to carry me into the kitchen, put me up on the table, and use a pair of tweezers to pull out the stinger from my foot. That was not fun. So I have that background knowledge schema combined with the text clues, and I can make an inference. Let's see. So I know that Scaredy Squirrel is deadly afraid of killer bees. One just flew by him. I know I have my own background knowledge about when I got stung by a bee, and I also know friends that I had that were allergic to bees, and they got stung. They sometimes had to go to the hospital or sometimes had to take medicine to help with it. So I had that schema in my background. So let's see. Going forward, I'm probably thinking along the lines that Scaredy Squirrel may either A, get stung and fall out of the tree and something bad may happen to him, or I'm thinking maybe Scaredy Squirrel, based on all the context clues that I had and my own background knowledge, probably won't ever want to leave his tree again because bees are real and bees hurt. And he's probably so scared of getting stung by bees that he's just going to stay in his tree forever and ever and ever because he's had such a strong fear of bees. So those are both inferences that I drew based on text clues that the author gave me about Scaredy Squirrel and my own background knowledge about bees. Notice that I did not make a prediction. Oh, I think Scaredy Squirrel is going to come down from his tree and invite the bee to go with him to Pizza Hut for a pepperoni pizza. Because there's nothing in our story that even gives us clues that that was where the story was leading. And there's nothing in my own personal background knowledge where I know of a squirrel that actually likes pepperoni pizza that goes to Pizza Hut. So that inference would not be appropriate. That would be way too out in outer space. We wouldn't want that inference. So make sure when you make an inference as a good reader that you're using the context clues provided to you by the author and that you're using your own background knowledge to draw a logical, sequential prediction or conclusion of what your character will do in the future of the story. Then you can answer these three questions. So, if I was drawing an inference based on my own background knowledge and the text clues from Scaredy Squirrel, I would say it says in the story that Scaredy Squirrel is deadly afraid of bees, especially killer bees. It said that in the story. So let's see. I know that from my own schema, from my own background knowledge, I know that when I was a child, I stepped on a bee and it stung horribly, and my mom had to pull out the stinger out of my foot. And I know that bees die. Some bees die, if not most bees die after they sting you. So I have that background information. So based on the text clues provided to me in Scaredy Squirrel and based on my own personal background and schema, I think that Scaredy Squirrel is going to be so deadly afraid to ever come out of his tree again because there are real bees and they do hurt when they sting. So Scaredy Squirrel is going to stay in his tree forever and ever and ever. So that's one inference I can draw. And that would be a logical sequential inference being made because of the text clues that I was given and also my own background knowledge. Going forward, you are going to be asked next to complete inferencing questions based on Mr. Giordano's inferencing worksheet that he's going to have you do. So if you need to replay this brief video defining what inferencing is, remember inferencing is using text clues the author provides you with, combined, added to your own background knowledge or schema, so that you can make a clear prediction, conclusion, or inference of what will happen to your character next in the story. You can use your clues in the text plus your schema and produce an inference. I can figure out something that wasn't explained to me in the story by using the clues that I was given and by using my own background knowledge, my own schema. I can figure it out. So go ahead, replay this video if you need further clarification of what inferencing is. If you feel comfortable where you're at, you may go ahead and complete Mr. Giordano's assignment on inferencing.